Okay, so today we're going to be talking about rolling coils by hand and troubleshooting to ensure that we get a round coil. The very first thing you want to do after you wedge your clay is prep your area. So move your project and tools aside to the center of the table. Make sure that the area that you're going to be rolling out coils on is free of crumbs and hair and anything else like that. You can just wipe it with your microfiber cloth. You really want your table to be more dry before you roll, or it's just going to slip and slide everywhere. So you can just take your apron, or if you have a dry microfiber cloth, you can just like wipe that down so that it's not going to slip and slide everywhere. You do not want to roll coils on a wedging board because the wedging board is absorbent, so it would absorb too much moisture out of your coil. All right, so I have toggle wire, I have some water in a bowl, I have a spray bottle, and I have my clay, okay? So after you have a piece wedged, you want to take a smaller chunk off of this. This would be too large to actually roll a coil with for beginners. I just feel like you would be rolling out something that would end up being like over 6 feet long, which would be extremely difficult to control. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to take a portion of our wedged clay, and you can either rip it off or you can just take your toggle wire and cut off a chunk. So I'm going to cut this one in thirds. This is about, I don't know, half a pound of clay or so, okay? So here's a small chunk, the size of like, I don't know, a golf ball, maybe a little bit bigger, like a mandarin orange. First thing you wanna do is take that clay and scrunch it into a hot dog shape. Now, when you scrunch it, you want to rotate it so that you're scrunching it on all sides to make it more round, just like that. So you can see how it's relatively even in its scrunchedness. Okay, so now you're gonna put that down on the table in front of you. And again, we have a lot of space that's available to roll, because when we roll, we need to roll fully through our entire length of our hand. This ensures that the coil is gonna rotate enough times to make it round, okay? In addition to that, you wanna keep your hands tacky, not slipping and sliding, just a little tacky, to make sure that we're leaving water in the coil versus just removing it by rolling it out and having it evaporate. Okay, so the first thing I like to do is take my hands and I start with the tips of my fingers. I tend to overlap my hands so that they work together as one if I'm going to use two hands. You can one hand coil as well, but two is nice, and you want to leave them relatively flat. Even slightly like curved, and we want to have our fingers come together instead of spreading out. And when you have your hands overlap like this, where your thumbs are touching each other, they're going to work as one, and they're going to work at the same pace. So I was just now, as I'm rolling, I wasn't adding any pressure to it other than just the weight of my hand, which really didn't change it that much. It just made it a little bit smoother. And you can see over here, this end is a little bit thinner. So I'm gonna like work on making that even throughout. So now I'm gonna go in with a little bit of pressure. Now that's subjective. I can't tell you to push hard or medium or slow, because that's different for everybody. So you just have to be willing to adjust your variable. So your first variable is your pressure. The second variable is your speed, how fast you're actually rolling. And your third variable is your distance of roll. So if I only roll like this, I'm gonna get a flat coil versus a round coil, and it's gonna flip-flop. So I wanna make sure that I'm rolling from the tip of my finger all the way to my wrist. So that's about 12 inches of space or so. If your piece does get flat versus round, what you wanna do is just tap it down on the tall side so that it's an even height. And then with a little bit of pressure and a little bit of speed, you're gonna start to roll. Notice how when I'm rolling, I'm going from left to right. I'm trying to evenly roll my coil. And as I'm doing this, I'm looking down at my coil and I'm standing. I want to have very even downward pressure. Once I start getting some length of this, I want to look for any areas that are too thin or too thick. If it's too thin, I'm going to avoid going over those areas. And if it's too thick, I'll just spend a couple extra seconds, perhaps just on that one area. Now, my pressure is much less. It's almost just the weight of my hand at this point because this clay is really soft. That's helping to even it out. In addition, I'm just using one hand so that like I can see it. If my hand starts feeling a little dry or I start seeing a little bit of surface cracks, you can always take like a little smear or bead of water that you blend over the top gently and then just roll that into the clay. And a lot of times that will help close up those little baby surface cracks. We are going to be rolling coils that are roughly 1/2 inch thick for this particular project that we're doing. When the coil is a little bit thicker, it helps us build our height faster. And again, just kind of stay on top of those surface cracks by rubbing it back and forth. So there we go. I like to equate it with like the size of my fingers. So it's similar to like my pinky finger, about 1/2 inch roughly. Okay, so I would want to use this immediately. I wouldn't want to like roll a whole bunch and then put them on the project later. For what we're doing and for the purposes of what we're doing, we are going to make it, put it on our project, make it, put it on our project. And that's going to ensure that these are not going to dry out. Because of this demo, I'm just going to lay this wet microfiber cloth over this one to keep it moist while I talk a little bit more about some other things that could happen. So I already talked about the flatness. There's another way that you can fix a flat coil, or try to. So again, taking a chunk of clay, starting by rotating it and squishing it into your hot dog shape. This is really important that you start this way. Otherwise, if you just start rolling a big sphere or even just like a chunk like this, it's not gonna round out and it can fold over on itself, and then you could be inadvertently trapping air in it. So again, my hands are moist and sticky, and I'm gonna try and make this one flat to show you guys another thing that you can do. All right, so here's a flat uneven coil. It's taller this way and shorter that way. So something that some people do is they'll tap it down and or they will twist it. So when you twist it, you don't want to like fully twist it, just enough to give it a little bit of a like pretzel twist. Then again, with a little bit of speed and pressure, you want to roll it out. And a lot of times that will fix it. Let's say you start rolling it out and it gets flat again, or like part of it's flat. Just tap down that area, and then again, with a little bit of speed and pressure, do a few passes over that area. Another thing that can happen is a lot of times, like you'll see students like spreading out their fingers and leaving it in one spot. What that's gonna do is gonna create a very uneven, bumpy coil where you can see finger marks, and there's even some fold overs. We want to avoid that. We want to try and have a nice even coil. So if that happens, then I'm just going to go ahead and go over those areas and see if I can fix it. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, or sometimes part of your coil looks good, and then the other part is, you know, not so great. So sometimes you have to only use parts of it. So I would cut off like the uneven parts. Or perhaps if it gets like really, really thin, because remember, we're aiming for 1/2 inch. I'm gonna make this one really thin. When it's a little bit thinner, you can actually do a braid or a twist, because when you twist or braid them, it's gonna make your unit that you're gonna put on a little bit thicker. So it's better to start with thinner coils anyway, that are relatively equal in size. So I'm just really spending my time gently going over this with just the weight of my hand. I'm barely pressing, just to kind of fix it and even it out. So you can see how thin this one is, and I'll compare it with my original one so that you can see the difference in the size of the coil. So this is probably about half the thickness of my original coil, so you can see the difference of the two right there. So if I wanted to do a twist with this, that'd be great. I could even like thin it out a little bit more if I wanted to do a braid, which would require 3 strands. So I will take this and fold it in half for a twist with a little bit of moisture on my hands. I'm going to then twist it. Now, you're not going to just twist it like this because that will create an uneven look. Instead, what we do is we take it and we lay it over, lay it over, lay it over. Sometimes it starts to go off in its own direction, so you may have to just move it and adjust it. And every time I do this, I'm looking at the previous twists that I created, and I'm trying to keep them relatively the same in their length. So once I do this, then I might like tighten up a couple spots that look maybe a little longer or shorter. Once I have that, then I can go ahead and chop my ends and I could lay it on my project. So I'm gonna put this one aside. Another thing that you want to think about is what other things you can create with coils. So we just talked about a twist and a braid, but really you can create lots and lots and lots of different looking coils. Some of them we can name, like a spiral, or a vertical piece or a horizontal piece, and some of them might just be random shapes that you create. So I'm gonna speed up the process here and work on rolling out this coil with a little bit of extra speed. Really notice how I'm standing over the piece and I'm allowing my hands to travel quickly along the length of it. Rolling coils should be fast, again, because coils dry out so quickly. We want to work quickly with the clay. If it were to mess up and you just scrunch it up and re-wedge it, just make sure you add a lot of water at that time. Okay, so some of the things that you might do, and I would have like something to cut with, like a knife, but I'm just gonna go for it. So one of the things I might do is a spiral. As you spiral, the clay might want to crack right here. So I'm just taking my finger and rubbing the surface, the outer surface of the coil back and forth, trying to bring those particles of clay back together. And again, I'm just spiraling it. Now, I just spiral until I get the size that I want, and then I would cut it with a knife. I'm just gonna rip it, and then I have this spiral. I could tighten it up so I don't have any negative space in the center, or I could leave that as part of my design. Then on the back side, with a blending modeling tool, I would blend it together. The front I would leave with the design. The bottom of it where I cut, that'll be the flat part. I can lightly tap it, and that's gonna give me a little bit of a flat surface that I'll be able to use as my attachment area to slip and score with. So that's a spiral. You can also take your spirals from round to a shape. So if I wanted to make this more square or rectangle, I could just tap it on multiple sides. So it's kind of a roundish, squarish piece. I could further that by angling the tapping and create more of a triangular piece. Also looks kind of like a leaf or a teardrop or a strawberry. Those are fun. Another thing I can do is create some flat pieces, such as like a staircase or something like that. Let me see if I have something to cut with. All right, so I would have to know what height I would want this to be in. I wouldn't go more than 3 inches. I feel like that's quite tall, and it would make it more difficult to stand up. So I could do a staircase effect where I take my original unit that I cut here and line it up, and then my next one I cut a little shorter and a little shorter, trying to have similar increments to the staircase effect every time, lining it up, cutting it straight down and going as far as I want to. And then I could perhaps go back up. So I could go around my piece like this, like up and down, up and down. I could even cut it on a ramp if I would prefer like more of a slope versus stairs. If I did that, I could just take a straight edge, line it up, and cut off right here. Again, I would need a knife. This isn't so great, but I could even use this and just chop that down at a nice angle like that. So it's a nice little ramp that I could build on. So then I could lay pieces on it that way. As I go up my piece, I could put anything really against that and it would take that shape. Anything else that you create out of coils you can use. I suggest that you roll out some coils and just play with them if you're not sure what you want to make. Anything that you mess up, like I said, just put some water in your hand, scrunch it up, collect all your crumbs and pieces until you have enough. Make sure you keep them really moist and then wedge them together before you use them.